Hey anybody, this is KW's Design Magic. We're going to talk about a little bit of my early magic. As a child, one of the ways to kind of, satisfy my craving for my, creating things and using my imagination was to build models. Now, I built ship models, I built plane models, and of course car models. The 1/32 size, I believe. And of course the cars became my way of expressing myself much more than planes and ships. Of course, we also had a train garden, but I never built much there, except for bridges and stuff for the garden. I found that I could buy models, and sometimes I would buy them that I didn't even really care about the style of the car that I was buying, but because of what was in the kit. Sometimes you would have options to make like 3 different cars, and in some cases it came with 2 different engines. So that gave me an extra engine that I could try fitting into one of my other cars. I can remember in one case I bought a dirt track car. It was a Ford, nothing interesting to me at all. However, all 4 tires were really wide, and I found out that I had this Tarantula dragster where I could put a pair of those tires on it, and it made it much badder looking because of the fatter tires. And then I could take the tires that were on it and put on one of my smaller models, like my Model T that had a Jaguar straight 6, but it was dual overhead cam, so it had a chrome valve cover, and so that looked cool too. So those are the kind of things that I would do. And in fact, that car, it was a Ford, I ended up turning it into a funny car. I filled in the wheel wells in the front. The back wheel wells, I moved the tires further to the rear, and I found an engine or maybe just a blower or whatever, and stuck on it, and turned it into a dragster or a funny car. And you have to remember the time period, because that's back when funny cars are just getting really started. Nowadays they don't look anything like the real cars that they are supposed to be similar to. But there was one type of model that really gave me the freedom to do just about anything my imagination could come up with, and that was rockets. Now that really gave me a lot of ideas and all, and since my family was always reluctant to buy me anything, whenever I could buy just pieces of stuff and then cut it out and turn it into something, they were more willing to allow me to do so. So for example, I decided to make a rocket that looked like an X-15. Well, there was no model out there like that, and they wouldn't have bought it for me anyway. But because of the way it's shaped and all, I realized that I could use just tag board and just take the fuselage of the cardboard tube of a rocket, shape a nose cone that looked more like the X-15, glue on side pods, put the fins on the back based on the the configuration of the X-15, and I had myself a rocket. Plus, I got to be creative at the same time. Now, if you know anything about an X-15, looking at the end of the fuselage, they're not symmetrical. And so for a rocket, that's not good. And even though it flew once or twice like it should, any of the other times it went end over end. I don't know whether, you know, if I could have corrected the fins some or something like that and gotten it to fly, but it didn't matter. It was just the idea that I got to build it, and it was all I felt like it was all mine. Except for the fact that I was copying a design that existed. I then had a chance I came up with another idea for a rocket, and I felt like this was the ultimate, and I'll show it to you. I took and made up a drawing of it because it's been thrown away. My mother didn't see any value in my stuff, so she would just throw things away. But anyway, there's my rocket, and I called it a ball rocket. Fitting enough. This rocket, the top ball is made out of balsa wood. The two below, the two that you see on there, which actually there's four, there's just two directly behind them, but those two were styrofoam. All five of the balls were 3 inches in diameter, and then the fins were just balsa wood, where I trimmed them in the shape you see there, and then knife edged the upper edge anyway, so that it would cut through the air better. Now, the balsa wood ball on the top, you couldn't buy anything like that, and the ball had to have a neck on the bottom to slide down into the cardboard tube. So I went down to Bobby's Hobby Lobby in Westminster. They are no longer there, and was able to talk my mother into buying a piece of balsa wood 6 inches long, 3 inches by 3 inches. I was in middle school at the time and had access to a wood lathe, and I went in there and really, with no template whatsoever, I just eyeballed it. I was able to carve out on that lathe the ball and the neck for going down into the cardboard tube. The other thing I had to do, though, was to have a guide rod on it, and I had to drill down through the ball off to the side, and believe it or not, I had to drill from both sides and meet in the middle, and by some stroke of a miracle, I actually was able to do that. I don't know how. It certainly wasn't talent. It was luck, but I'll thank the Lord for that. So anyway, I had this rocket, and the first way I tried to launch it was using 3 what they call C engines. And I chose that because that's what I had. And I thought it kind of looked cool because 2 of the engines were going to be on the outside of the tube. The thing was I couldn't get them to all light at the same time. It was very difficult to make that happen. So finally I was able to convince my parents to buy me the larger engines. They're called a D engine. And in the case of my rocket, I had to use what was a 0 delay on the backfire. The backfire pushes the nose cone off, in this case the balsa wood ball, and underneath of that ball is a parachute so it can come down. Well, I figured that as soon as the engine quit burning, that it would quit flying. A lot of times when an engine stops burning, there's so much momentum, it just keeps on going. The rocket keeps on going for a while. But not in the case of mine. I was pretty sure it was going to just stop, you know. And so I got some engines, and I was able to successfully fire it, and sure enough, as soon as the engine quits, the chute needs to come out because it's coming back down. So I got it working really good, and then the middle school had a rocket show, and so we were launching our rockets, and I might have this covered in another video of a different type, but I shot mine off twice, and because it was so slow, it was popular. Most of the people figured faster, higher was going to make them more popular, but actually slower and lower was what the kids liked, and that was because they could see it, and after the parachute would come out, it would come down and it would land on its 4 styrofoam balls on its 4 legs, and that just was so cool to everybody. So it was a big hit. I just wish I could have carried the popularity, you know, for my own. Yeah, in other words, I wished I was popular, but only the rocket got the attention, not me. Now I'll tell you, finish this video up on another rocket that I built, and I'm going to say this right up front. I knew this one wasn't going to work. But this is part of designing. Sometimes you do things just to see what happens. You don't know what you're going to learn. And in this case, I built a pinwheel. Only instead of sitting it upright, I set it down so that it would spin and fly. And I made it all out of galvanized tin. And of course that's dangerous. But I just took and I cut out a circle of metal. I drilled a hole in the center for the guide rod. I made 4 cuts, twisted the blades so they were all as close as I could get to equal. Then I soldered a ring of metal around it, and I soldered 2 metal tubes that I had rolled out of the same material so that a rocket engine would fit in them. And the rocket engines were canted in opposite directions, so both of them were pointing down, but were on opposite sides of the pinwheel. So I knew everything had to be absolutely perfectly symmetrical for this to work. I mean everything. The angle, the distance from the center, the balance of the pinwheel, rocket, whatever you want to call it. Everything had to be absolutely perfect because there was nothing to compensate for it. I don't know if most of you realize, but when a rocket goes off at Cape Canaveral or wherever, those rockets are balanced by the rocket nozzle moving to stay underneath of the rocket itself. I mean, those rockets want to fall over. It's not like when a model rocket where the speed of the rocket keeps it in flight because of the air traveling across the wings. So here in this idea, I'm going against all hope that this thing is going to work, but I don't care. I want to build it anyway, and I don't consider it a waste of time. This is the way I look at things. I am recommending that you all, as designers, do the same thing. I know there's a lot of people tell you you're stupid for it, but even an artist should go and draw things and paint things in ways they themselves don't think is going to look that good, just to see what the difference is. And I have a story about that as well, but we'll get to that one of these days. So anyway, I get this thing all put together. I get it set up out there on my launch pad. I have igniters plugged into each one of the rocket engines, the electrical type that are lit using a 12-volt battery. I set this all up and pull our one tractor out there so I can hide behind the tractor to keep me from getting hit by anything, because that's how sure I am this thing isn't gonna work. And I hit the button, and surprisingly enough, both engines lit, which that was the first miracle, because that was never something that worked for me in the past. The thing started spinning. It started lifting off. As soon as it started lifting off, it started putting load on the guide rod. The rod couldn't hold it. It was that far out of balance. It bent the rod. The two engines, well, one engine actually flew off. It ripped the solder joint and come flying over and landed underneath of the tractor. The other one, with the rest of the pinwheel, went in another direction, and my guide rod was all bent to crap. Of course, when that one landed underneath of me, the engine still had a backfire to it, because I didn't have engines without a backfire to use. So this thing's laying underneath the tractor, fizzing out, and I'm there going, oh shit. About the time it blows up, and it splits that rocket, the tube, the metal tube, wide open, right? And of course, that's it. All the energy's lost at that point, and all the excitement is over with. But I learned a lot of things. First off, I was right. It wasn't going to work. I was right about why it wasn't going to work. I learned that I need to do a better job of my soldering when I accomplish or attempt something like this. I had the fun of now being able to say that I tried something crazy, and it loosened up my mind to try something even crazier next time. And I like that. And it's fun. And it's part of life. And it's part of not being childish, but, having fun doing childish things. Things that are fun. So, for me, they're fun. All right. Thanks a lot. Hope you got some encouragement. So, talk to you later.